Welcome back, everybody. I'm sitting here with the homie, Randell Hynes, who was with me at the Andrew Yang event. Randell is running for Nevada District 3 of Congress. He's a moderate Democrat. He recently founded Rampart Caucus, which we'll talk about. And before that, he founded the Middle Party, which is a platform of common national priorities that all Americans can adopt. And any candidate can cite support for being hired as federal office. He is one of our lovely veterans. He spent 6 years in the Army. And here is a very cool part, and I think this is what we're going to discuss for the majority of our conversation, is that he's a self-taught computer programmer who spent the last 30 years in the tech space. We sat and talked before we started recording for about 15 minutes of his career in the tech space. And man, there's a lot to share, but there's a lot that Randell can bring to Nevada. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. I love being here.
Yeah. First, how did you think about the Andrew Yang event? And also congratulations today on officially receiving endorsement from Andrew Yang.
It was fantastic. It was just kind of like a whirlwind. You know, I've been talking back and forth with the folks at Forward Party for, I guess, since I announced my candidacy. Just basically saying, hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing. You know, you guys are doing something a little different, but maybe if you just leverage the primaries, which are very low turnout, maybe you can get a little bit of the enthusiasm that you have going there and get enough votes to get your people through.
So first, for preface, when did you announce you were running for District 3?
Yeah, just a little bit after Thanksgiving. So I think that first week in December when I started, putting out feelers, asking, the media to pay attention. I, sent a email to Sandra Cosgroves, who's very key in the state, and she's very involved in the open primary initiative right now. So yeah, it's been a little while now.
Did you ever have ambitions to run for politics and be in this crazy political space that people seem to love, and then once they're in it, seem to tend to rethink their decisions in life?
Well, honestly, I probably haven't shared this with my wife, but when I was going into my freshman year in college, which was many moons ago, 78, 79, my thing was I want to go get a law degree and become president. So yeah, I was thinking about it a long time ago, and then for a while, I actually thought about, what are the things that I should do or avoid in order to position myself to be president at some day forward. Had put that on the burner a long time ago, decades ago, and it's been 40 years since then. But I've always been had politics in the back of my mind. The things that I started writing about a year ago were ideas that were kind of dammed up my head over about 15 years. I sat down, registered alluptous.com and now enoughsenough.com about 15 years ago, just with the idea I was gonna write and blog about those kind of things. So
yeah, I'm beginning to see this trend, not only just in Vegas, but across America, of lifelong entrepreneurs trying to dive into politics. I don't know if it's because the majority of us are just fed up with these career politicians who kind of resemble middle managers of a corporation. Mm-hmm. But I think this is kind of where the future is going. And I talked about this with Andrew while we were there as well. That's kind of something that they hope the Forward Party can be a platform for. But also in Vegas, it's a very entrepreneurial driven town.
Right.
So it's awesome to see, especially in a purple state where it kind of swings back and forth every 8 years, mm-hmm. 12 years, it kind of swings back and forth.
Right.
Have you been a lifelong Democrat? I know I mentioned that you founded the Middle Party and the other caucus, and you've been kind of nonpartisan mostly your entire life.
Right.
Was there a reason to run with the Democrats for this?
Well, actually, this time last year, roughly, I was a Republican. I'm a lifelong Republican. I actually cast my first vote for Ronald Reagan in 80. But when I started writing, during the pandemic, it was to try to justify a lifelong of voting for the GOP, and I couldn't get there. So that's where the Middle Party came. I saw polls from Gallup over 14 years that said, most people don't want to be labeled as a Democrat or Republican. And every month they put that poll out of a whole fresh batch of respondents, and at least 40% of people say they don't want to be a Democrat or Republican. They go on farther. Which way would you lean? But which way would is there to lean other than right or left? So
the last, I guess you could say, since the start of the 21st century in America, it's been a heavily partisan economy and nation. Although now we're starting to see movement of trying to bring everyone back to the middle, from the Forward Party, from yourself, and all these other initiatives. Maybe social media has been that divider, but it can also be that bridge to bring everyone back.
Right.
Do you think that there's an opportunity for moderation and not to just keep pushing these poles of conservatism and liberalism out farther to where there might be a breaking point?
That's my hope. And I mean, once I started really looking into, how I would present the middle party, I came to a point where, and through my research, I learned that, even in the late 50s, 60s, and even in the 70s, that about half of the people in Congress were moderates. A lot more bigotry then, but I would like to get back to the point where there's more moderation, so that, and in my view, the moderation, I think in most people's view, is it's people in Congress that would consider people first. They would say, okay, how does that affect the people instead of considering party first, or maybe only, because that's where we've gotten to. We've been using the primary elections for about 100 years now to nominate the Republicans and the Democrats into the general election. And it's gotten to the point where nationwide, only about 10% of the eligible voters show up. So 23 out of 235 million people actually show up there. And as an example, there's 93 voters on my street. 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats out of 93 decide who we vote for in the upcoming election.
How crazy is that? So I had on Jane Addams, who's running for District 1. You're running for District 3.
Right.
Can you just tell us what are the parameters and the area within Nevada that is District 3?
Yeah, generally, if you're west of I-15, anything south of Henderson, Boulder City, all the way down to Laughlin, there's a little triangle south of the airport. And the cutoff line is about where the city limits is for Henderson.
And how many people? What's the population of that district? Do you know off the top of your head?
They're all about 500,000 now. So we're 2.2 million voters, and they're roughly about 500,000 each.
And it's going to come down to a few tens of thousands of votes.
The last midterm, about 35,000 people showed up.
Wow.
And then there were 59,000 that showed up for the last midterm, or for the last open primary.
And this brings into your website. You had, I believe it was 14 different points that you wanted to focus on during your campaign. Right. And I believe one of them had to do with general voting, if I'm correct.
Right.
Is it that you wanted to increase the participation of it? You wanted to make the process easier? We could just dive into this one to start.
Yeah, exactly. So once I, realized that, maybe middle party wasn't the best option, I started the Rampart Caucus. It was another nonprofit, which the idea was, let's create a platform where, any candidate, red or blue, could adopt into a set of common ground. About Thanksgiving time, I realized that I'd written everything I could, and it was just, I got to the point where I was thinking, okay, well, this is where I'm at. This is what I've learned. I want to share this with you. Why don't you run? And we need more moderates to run in the primaries, and the primaries are very low turnout. So I think that we can go and overwhelm them with people that want there to be more moderation and representation of the general electorate that's in the district. So that was the open primaries was the actual core of what I wanted to do when I announced that I was going to run for Congress. I finally realized that nobody else was going to do it, and then I had to do it.
Why do you think Nevada's had such an issue with enacting this and having an open primary, do you think that some of the politicians or the political parties tend to safeguard this to protect their own interests and keep their own party in power?
Well, that's exactly it. And then that's the way it is, nationwide. We're actually one of 9 states that is totally closed. Only Republicans can vote in the Republican, and only Democrats can vote in the Democrat. In the other states, there's some degree of what voters can vote in different rules, but we're totally closed. And so far, the parties are pushing back on this new initiative to say we want open primaries and we want this new voting system that will allow more people to run in the primaries in order to make it over into the general election.
Yeah, it becomes like this chicken or the egg situation, and there's a lot of forward-thinking individuals that try to introduce new types of innovation, whether it's from politics or tech or into different organizations where there's a power struggle. And the one I know you're smiling that I'm going to bring up is with crypto, right? A lot of, and Andrew was talking about this, and we hear this time and time again of the different institutions, whether it's the federal government or even the world governing body like the IMF, that just continue to refute the adoptability of Bitcoin because right. it kind of siphons away some of their power and gives it back to the people.
Right.
You have a heavy tech background. You've seen it grow from a Bitcoin or a crypto standpoint. Do you see this as an inevitability? And have you thought about utilizing this if you were elected as a representative?
Absolutely. So I actually trying to explain it to him from a boomer's point of view. So, I'm a guy that, first car I had an 8-track, and then it went over to, the little cassettes. And actually my first computer, I was using cassettes to record, the word processing documents. So that's how far back that I reached. But, we went over from cassettes to CDs and then into digital music. And it was the exact same situation. The music companies were, instead of trying to figure out how to make money with it, set it up, get it to work for them, they push back on digital music. So we're at a point now where, the government's pushing back on it. It's not widely acceptable, but it is inevitable. There's no way that it's not going to be the standard within, who knows, very short period of time. I think it's the security's there, the measures for being able to make it work are there, and the enthusiasm, and young people are coming up, and a lot of young people are just fed up that the government's still stuck in the 20th century. 22 years into the century, and we're still stuck in the 20th century. So we need to drag these guys. I'm one of them. I see it, but we need to drag everybody out of the 20th century into the 21st century, so we can look forward.
Yeah, we need to go exactly forward much faster.
Yeah,
it's become painful and frustration, and even just from a top-down approach, where if the presidential election happens to be Biden and Trump again, everyone's gonna absolutely lose it, because then it remains with their cabinet and their people in office who don't want to look forward. If you look at it from a federal position, or you look at it from like a nationwide standpoint, America has been the capital of like intellectual power. It's been the world power of innovation. If we don't move forward, what do you think happens to America? And then if that does happen, let's say Biden or Trump are elected again, then does it come on to the states to then innovate on their own prowess?
Yeah. Let me take a step back to where you said, where, if it comes in 2024, if it's Biden and Trump again, we won't stand by for that. I think we're just fed up. The one thing, the only thing that I see that came good of the Trump era was that we identified that there is a group of people that don't feel like that they have a voice. And as we move forward and those people realize that we're going to continue to be stuck, they're going to speak up, and they're going to start voting the way that they need to put more moderation to Congress. And I think that Congress being unresponsive because they're so polarized is what's putting us at a standstill. And it's just a shame that we came to the point where Congress is incapable of making any decisions when we were hit by this deadly pandemic, and then cannot consider even basic ideas when innovation is what we need to be considering. All the things that we need to make a plan to move forward.
Now, narrowing it down to a Nevada standpoint, are there any tweaks immediate tweaks that you could see to Nevada's economy or Las Vegas specifically in your district that come to mind in terms of moving that district or our city forward?
Absolutely. We're faced with a situation now where we have an unresponsive Congress that needs to be able to coordinate between different states, and a situation where the Colorado River has become unreliable. What are we going to do about that? We know that there's going to be back to back good snowfalls in the Colorado area in the melt-off to fill the river back up and get us back to a point. And I like to say that in that situation, hope is not a strategy. We can't just hope that it's going to happen. I've been suggesting that the Bureau of Reclamation's ideas about importing water into the basin have a real foundation, but their conclusion was that there's so much red tape involved that a 5-year planning and a 5-year construction period would turn into a 30-year project because of all the red tape, because of all the pushback. We have 218,000 miles of oil and gas pipeline. There's no reason why we can't have not one big pipeline or an aqueduct coming in from the east. We don't have a water problem. We have a water transportation problem, and we need to come up with a solution to quickly pipe water into the basin and get it where it's needed here in Las Vegas, where we have a huge thriving metropolis.
That is a very proper point, because when you see the commercials or you see the social media ads in terms of the drought, it's very doomsday. They never present any solutions. That's probably part of the marketing, but I've never heard anyone say out in the open that it's actually a transportation problem. Mm-hmm. Is the pipeline the right way? Is there something where you put it on some sort of like hypercar or hyperspeed train, which has been proposed in Nevada for what seems like 20 years now at this point? Can we just go simple semi-truck transportation? Maybe get Elon Musk in with his self-driving semis that are being introduced. What do you think is the best way forward for that?
I think it just is the basic. There's already an industry that's piping liquid around the country. And we all know that even if you just have a tap on the tub on for a short period of time, that eventually it's going to fill it up. If we have, several of those projects that are continuously filling in, there's plenty of water back east. It's public resource, and there are paths that we can take to use those that will minimize the amount of environmental impact. Because with the hundreds of thousands of miles of gas pipeline out there already, we should be able to just parallel those. They're all going the same place. You can look at a map of all the gas pipelines that are out there right now, and we could parallel those and have minimal amount of pushback from environmentalists.
Interesting. I do hope that it gets fixed. I saw a recent picture of a boat that was recently uncovered in Lake Mead that was like straight down, that had been down there for decades at some point.
Buildings down there too.
The World War II plane is down there, which I think we're hoping new bodies are surfacing. Unfortunately, down in Lake Mead, who knows how long that's been down there.
Right.
It's quite wild. But in terms of public goods and things that are needed in Nevada, another bullet point that I saw on your website had to do around solar energy and solar powered. We have hundreds of square miles of open desert that many people, many entrepreneurs reference Nevada that could be pretty much a hub for solar energy that could power the entire United States. on there was a few other things that were surrounding solar power. So just like if you could just extend on the idea of like what you think the future of solar energy is in Nevada.
Sure. Yeah. So it's the best place on earth and with a need. And, there's areas in Central Africa that have the same kind of sun power. We measure the capability of an array to generate electricity by the number of full sun hours that it can generate in a day, and we're pushing around 7. And there's areas in Africa that can do that also, but not with the need that we have here in Las Vegas and in Southern California. And that's actually one of the feathers in my cap. I went to Carson City to lobby for taxi cab drivers. I would go over and drive a cab to get on my computer cave, and I noticed that the drivers didn't have a voice. They didn't have anybody to go over and talk for them at the Taxi Cab Authority meetings, the Nevada Transportation Authority meetings, and they were getting the short end of the stick. So I went over to speak up for them. Went to Carson City for them. Was treated unfairly also, but in the same meetings, I found an interest in solar. And there was some grant programs that were coming federally that had been announced. And I went to Associated Builders and Contractors after I was done there, and I asked, are you thinking about doing anything for solar? I said, well, we've been thinking about it. 2 weeks later, we were doing it. So we put together a program. I started a nonprofit called Solar Forces, and generally the sum result of it was that we trained about 1,200 electricians to go over and get their license at OSHA. There's a required OSHA license to be able to install solar PV in the state. So I have a really keen insight. I would do workshops called Dollar and Cents of Solar that would show homeowners with the sense of being able to put a solar array on their roof and be able to feed the meter so that part of the year you'd get some of the credit back of electricity that you didn't use. So I have a really good feel for that. So I went back after doing all this, went back to Carson City and talked about solar co-ops, and it got short circuited also by MV Energy, mm-hmm. And we didn't make it any farther, and it just came to the point where I had to go back to computers. I spent all my time for 2.5 years doing solar, had to take care of my family. So I went back to computers because the jobs just weren't coming. We created all these jobs in order to, or not jobs, but the licenses in order to do jobs, and the projects just didn't come. And it's surprising to me that how much pushback there is on being able to put up a solar array in the desert. I went to environmental impact a couple of times for putting solar arrays up, and it was basically the folks that were complaining about it were the off-roaders, the ones that were out there tooling around in the desert, tearing the desert up, and the Sierra Club, which it was a complete surprise to me, thinking that Sierra Club would be the one that would be in there advocating for solar, but they have more of a leaning towards conserving what's out there. So this is where I'm at now. There's plenty of federal property within the valley floor. Build up from those because they're available according to the wording of the 1998 Lands Act. There's federal land that's available to put solar arrays around the valley. We could build solar co-ops like that, and I'm 100% on board for distributed solar for businesses and for homes. Net metering, and the solar co-ops would basically be a larger. We'd have to change the rules a little bit, but for a solar co-op would just be another a large net metering operation.
So let's say we did build a large solar farm out somewhere in the Sierra Desert right. of Nevada. When it comes to funding, is this something that you would see as a government subsidy? Would it be a collaboration of private funding and government? How would you think we'd get those built?
Well, I'm actually going to go the other way. I believe that solar has its applications. It has an application for using in distributed, like I just mentioned, in a small solar co-op, where it's close to where the electricity is being used, or on a roof, or in some area where you could actually use it in a net metering situation. But unfortunately, solar is not reliable enough to actually energize the grid. You know, in a long-term energy plan, I would see more of using solar in the distributed, getting natural gas to transition over to the standard nuclear power, which right now we're generating 20% of our clean energy from nuclear, which is a totally carbon-free generation. And then one of the things that Andrew also supports is this new use of thorium. It's another radioactive material that it's actually referred to more as a molten salt nuclear, but it's thorium. The thorium actually has the same properties and the same capabilities as uranium, but you can't weaponize it, and it can be recycled back through the system in order to minimize the amount of waste also. So the actual waste that has to be stored later is very minimal.
Yeah, I've heard the name thorium popped up in a handful of podcasts and intellectual just conversations. I'm sure there probably has to be a lot more research that's surrounding it.
There is. Yeah,
nuclear we know is, to me, seems like the future. It has got a bad rap, obviously, because of some of the chaotic uses that it's been used, unfortunately, but some rebranding and some retooling surrounding that. But to me, it seems like energy innovation is destined for Nevada. Mm-hmm. It's just one of the material dense states, right? Where we're extracting tons of different minerals out in the desert. There's a bunch of gold miners that are out there. And I know during the pandemic, there was like a big farce about taxing the gold miners because they have subsidies. And there's a lot of things that go on outside of this neon desert of Las Vegas that many people don't realize is happening.
Sure.
Let's say, outside of like energy and public goods, and we'll focus a little bit on the economy of Las Vegas. Right. We know that it was the hardest hit city during the pandemic, 30.1% unemployment, I believe.
Right.
I'm born and raised out here, and in my entire life, there's been open discussion about bridging away from tourism dependency. Mm-hmm. We haven't completely got there yet, although we're starting to now see various industries pop up in Las Vegas because of the migration out of New York and California and some of these other areas.
Right.
How do you see from your mind that we finally bridge off of tourism dependency and then become this well-established city that is not only an iconic name brand to come party, but also to come live and build a future?
I've seen that too. I've seen the push for, having more industrial space and doing more manufacturing. Obviously the caveat on that is that most anything we do, we're going to have to bring it here. So it's, and I was sitting with my son at the McDonald's the other day, and he said something about, that where all the trees came from. And I said, but everything, we had to bring everything in here. So regardless of, what, and then the kind of things that we do, anytime that we want to buy something, that money doesn't stay here. You have to send it out somewhere to buy products somewhere else to bring them back here to manufacture. So it's we're kind of in a little, we're literally in a desert. So one thing that struck me from talk of the county was talking about doing things that they see more of the entertainment moving out into the suburbs a little bit, where they try to leverage some of the entertainment that is on the strip, but farther out into the suburbs, things like that. But yeah, and we really have to lick the water problem, find out something that we know that we can rely on later, and I don't see a whole lot of other things on the horizon that are going to be there, unless we come up with a nice core of tech. If we become the new tech central, and there's a lot of people here that are very enthusiastic about crypto and coming up with new products in order to drive that industry. I see that as a big boon to Las Vegas.
We are on the horizon of this tech boom. Outside of just crypto and the movement of probably about 1,000 or so people in Vegas that are very active in the community. You have things like Tech Alley that are popping up. Right. Things like Blackfire, which is the 144-acre property owned by UNLV that wants it to be this.
Oh,
exactly. This tech hub of the city. It's
glad you remind me of that. I was looking into that. That's a fantastic program. But yeah, it's and it doesn't take that many people. It does. I mean, you said 1,000, but it doesn't take that many people to drive that kind of industry and get it going. I mean, when we're sitting here in the arts district, and when I first came here, it was a thought, and it was a corner. Then it was a, weekly or monthly festival. And now look at it now. It's really grown. It's
become an established place for creators to come and live. That was the main reason why I moved down here 2 years ago. And I've had on a handful of business owners in this area. And that's why they came down 5 years ago, is seeing the original vision. Yeah. A unique property to Vegas and maybe some other up and coming cities is that the degrees of separation between you and maybe somebody who's in a position of power is quite small.
Right.
For me to get you on, it was one person in between us. For me to talk to, who knows, maybe the mayor or a casino owner, it's one or two, maybe three people.
Right.
When you go to congested areas like New York and LA and Chicago, it's maybe 15 people. So that's why there's a big logjam. But here,
and I want to always be that way. I always want to be that, just one or two people away from sitting down and talking to somebody like you, because we really need to stay in touch. I always say that if representatives really wanted to know what's on our mind, where's the app for that? Where's the communication that a representative would use, where I would sit down on the couch, see a notice, and then respond to it so that I can tell them what I think? It doesn't exist. If I get into Congress, it's going to exist on day one.
So let's say you get elected to Congress and you go down to DC. I believe as a representative, you're down there, was it 9 months out of the year, 10 months out of the year?
I think it's roughly half.
Half?
Yeah. It depends on how they like this year being a primary year, it's a little less, but it turns out to be a little over half or more. I
have heard horror stories. I had on a few years ago George Chanos, who was the Attorney General, and he lived, and before that he was also an intern for somebody that was one of the senators of Nevada. And he said that when you're down in Washington D.C., there's so many special interest groups and lobbyists that are around. Sometimes he sees how it's easy to become manipulated and persuaded because you have 15, 20 different lobbyists in your office per day trying to sway you with different opinion.
I've discussed that. I've actually thought, we proved that we can actually operate distributed. Why did the representatives even need to go to Washington, D.C.? We've got enough tech to be able to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And then what do you got? You got, our representatives sitting out here in our district. They're not as accessible by this group of lobbyists and donors. They may not be good to the folks that want to raise money, but if you're doing a good job and you're representing your people, you should just be able to get reelected. Yeah, and that's what we're doing with very 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 little resources and just a grassroots effort, just getting it out there, getting in front of people, going out and talking to folks, getting my face in front of all the meetings, come on podcasts like yours, but. I think it's doable. I feel really good about where we're at right now.
And you're definitely saying that the right answer is as a tech forward nation. Vegas is hungry for it. As somebody who's been through in the entrepreneur community for a handful of years now and worked on the Strip for 10 years, Vegas and Nevada has been bashed for being a low education state, but that's to me that's a traditional statistic. They don't talk about a lot of the entrepreneurs who maybe maybe didn't fit the traditional education style of sitting in a classroom 8 hours a day. And we're coming to find out that most people actually are not suited for that because of all the distractions or different learning styles.
Right.
But I have noticed, which is networking with people out here, that the freedom to go pursue whatever is their interest, and then they could go create a lot of capital on the strip. And then if they're lucky enough to not get stuck in this Vegas cycle of partying consistently, they can go take that money and go build somewhere else.
Right.
I don't know how we turn that into some sort of statistic, but it's something that so many people overlook about Las Vegas is the very forward thinking nature of the city. I mean, it is a city that has historically torn down the old stuff and then put up new stuff in between. We see this with the Strip and the downtown and all the various areas.
And reinvented itself. You know, we've gone through several cycles where we've reinvented ourselves and brought ourselves up. You know, the biggest big build experience should be able to do something like getting us water. You know, if you put that mindset in there and then get Congress to be responsive so that we can collaborate between the 7 states that share the Colorado River and the states on the outside that might want to get more water from the pipelines that are coming along back from the areas that you know, where it's abundant. It's doable.
Collaboration is big from a statewide angle, but also from a local angle. Mentioned a little bit, touched on it about your campaigning so far. How's the experience been over the last about 6 months since deciding to put your hat or your name in the hat and decide to run?
Yeah, I just tweeted out today that I feel like that you know I've done everything that I possibly can, and that other than just, you know, showing up at the election sites and letting people see that there's a presence out there, that we've hit all of our milestones. I feel really good about what's going on right now. And at first it was, you know, people come up and, you know, stand in my face and say, you know, why are you running against Susie Lee? Even my wife said, why are you running against Susie Lee? She's so nice. Well, it's not just Susie Lee. It's all the representatives going to Washington. The voters have basically gave them their power to represent them. And then they're going to Washington, D.C. and just giving that power away to the majority leaders, to the leaders that are in their party, and in a voting straight party line. We need people there that can represent people, which is most of us, not just the parties, because generally the party that's in charge only has about 25% associations. It's not big. So basically, by voting party line, you're ignoring the other 75%. So it needs to change so that there's a moderate middle there that's representing the middle. The things that are going on in Congress right now, there's, you know, a sparse spattering of moderation with Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. Well, they're vilified for standing up for people. I've listened to both of them, and the things that they actually say are kind of the things that I'm saying, that we should, you know, first represent our people, think what it is that we can do next to help people rather than helping the party interest.
Yeah, and if Andrew Yang's Forward Party assists in the movement of disintermediating the duopoly, that should be the long-term view. I don't know where along history, and maybe it's even way before my time, where it became party first and people second before people first, party second.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I in reading history over the last year, researching, it was the late 50s, the 60s when we had the Civil Rights Bill, 70s when the 80% of the members were veterans, and then from about 1980, it's just been declining. The few and fewer people show up at the primaries because the only candidates that are showing up are the ultra partisans ones, and they are positioning themselves to be the most partisan candidate in their primary, which is it's actually kind of a flip flop. And I honestly expected that the same thing was going to happen when I entered this race, that I would position myself as a moderate, and Susie Lee would position herself as, you know, ultra Democrat or progressive even, which is kind of where she's at. But that's not what happened. She actually stood fast in the middle, even though her voting record says just the opposite, that she voted straight party line, since she's been there for almost 4 years. And she's done these things in like the Problem Solvers Caucus, and she's done these things, with the infrastructure bill. Those are great. But, generally protecting us and building highways is the real thing that the federal government's supposed to do. So just doing her job and being there was her accomplishment.
How long has Susie Lee been in office for?
She's in her second term, so she's almost at the end of 4 years.
And as somebody mentioned that you study history, I'm also a big history buff. And this is publicly known that the incumbent tends to win like a large majority of the time.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because people see their representative as being the good one, even though only 20% of people say that Congress is working. They're the good one because they go there and they don't make waves and they do their job and they're nice and they surrender basically the power that they were given to represent to the party leader. So that's the crux of it. But that's not working. We need to send more people there that only consider people and don't consider party or donors or any outside influences. And we actually draft legislation that's not only going to, pass in our chamber, but in the upper chamber, and not just build this big, huge omnibus bill, and then try to shoehorn it into the other chamber, and then say, "Oh, I told you so," and then say, if you got 50 things in there, one of them is veterans and one's for children, and then they say the other side is evil because they don't like children or they don't like veterans, even though the good majority of the bill is not something that's affordable or things that Americans would prioritize.
These giant 1,000-page packages that are, as you mentioned, an omnibus of a handful of things that aren't even tangentially associated with each other seem to be kind of the epitome of politics as watching during the pandemic, first the COVID bill that was packaged with weird allocations to other cities of different social causes and funding for these like various projects that there is literally no explanation for.
Right.
That seems to be a big frustration, not just from a state level, but just from a country level.
Right.
Can we ever disassociate from that kind of idea of just becoming very focused on specific ideas and causes and legislation without having to force a handful of other things in there that aren't related?
Well, if we get the power of being able to decide what gets pushed forward, from the top, which it hasn't always been that way. Only since we started to become more polarized and the party leaders can have more control over their caucus, that the power to be able to decide what gets pushed forward has risen to the top, by sending more veterans and more moderates, to Congress. We want to bring that back a little bit closer to the center. It doesn't have to be smack dab in the center, and we're always going to disagree on things, but there's common ground that we can reach in and we can say, okay, these are our American values. What are we going to do to help people? And those people are the ones that need to kind of, just kind of pull that power away from the top.
Politics are so fascinating once you learn the dynamic from the local state level to the federal level to the small city level. Yeah. It seems like from a local level, we tend to agree more with one another on opposite sides. And then once you get to the federal level, there's this drastic disparity, or they tend to focus on that one difference and kind of hammer it away. From your perspective, against your opponent, what would you say is what idea or what is the big difference between, let's say, you or Susie Lee? Is there any topic of contentious that comes to mind that the listeners would like to know? Because as I say, I'm like, when we listen to Randell, everything's awesome. we like Susie because she's the incumbent, right? We don't know, but what is the difference between both your policies, which is the main one?
The very top of my list, affordable priorities, creating a long-term national energy strategy, the things that I just discussed earlier. The things that the progressive folks are saying, they have the right spirit, they have the right idea that we want to get to, an America that is more healthy and is going to survive, but they're kind of doing it the wrong way. It's too short-sighted, because the two things that they're doing that in order to move things forward, ruining the oil industry, which we need to transition, away from coal, is making coal more affordable. And you kind of think, well, what are the things that the coal industry would actually do in order to, make them, to allow themselves to continue to be relevant? And that's actually ruining the oil industry and promoting solar as being a source for, a reliable source for central generation of electricity. It's good for distributed, but it's not good for as a reliable source for actually energizing the grid with all the electricity that we need. And if we're going to continue to have more electric cars, we're literally going to be charging billions of more batteries. We need a reliable energy system that allows us. And the only place that we're going to be able to get that carbon free is from nuclear.
Yeah, I agree. And just for those that are listening, just for a point of clarification, a distributed energy system would be things like solar panels on homes and roofs and things that are powered on a small, minute
or in a
fraction.
Small solar co-op, something like that. We have a lot of federal little parcels around the valley floor that we could build on without going farther out into the desert.
Right. Yeah. And then you're saying, like, from a large economy standpoint, the solar power tech just isn't there yet to support an entire city at a time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's there's not enough there, and there's not a storage technique that will allow us to, make it overnight. It's just not there.
Yeah, so
I don't see us getting there. I mean, it's a grand dream, and Germany thought that they might do something like that, but they were trying to do this with the same solar power as Alaska. So it's just not working out.
And one other campaign priority that I had written down that we didn't get to talk to, which you had a few different points towards, was border protection.
Right.
Affects us all. Just saying border protection seems to cause a lot of hairs to stand up because it's been so heavily politicized.
Exactly.
What's your opinion towards it?
Tolerance. We want a safe border, and it really comes down to just this key. The federal government's job should be to unite us and keep us safe. Having a border where people can just walk in is not keeping us safe. Having 23 million people living here anonymously is not keeping us safe. But there's nothing we can do other than tolerance. Find a way to get those folks into our society. Welcome them in. And I know that if there's any Republicans that are listening right now, they're throwing their arms up and saying, no, they're going to consume our resources. But we aren't a country that has been governed. We know that we can't progress by governing by revenge. We need tolerance. I mean, where would we be if we were the government that governed by revenge? Who would our friends be? Who would our enemies be? All the people that we've been in world wars with. Those are our best friends now. Japan, Germany, they would be our enemies now if we governed by revenge. The people in the South after the Civil War, we learned from that you can't govern by revenge. That you need to consider people and figure out how you're going to get people together in order to get to the other side, and make ourselves unite us and make ourselves more safe.
America was built from immigration. All of our leaders, even going back to Albert Einstein and building the rockets during World War II, was all imported from Germany, and it continues to extend now that a lot of our greatest tech leaders. Elon Musk had came over from South Africa and then through Canada. We had a lot of the great investors also came down from Canada in various areas, and a lot of the tech leaders or the tech developers are coming over from India.
Right.
And we can't just allow that to dissipate if we want to be a world power, or even just from a local level, if we want to continue to be one of the top cities in America, one of the best name brands of Las Vegas. No matter where you go across the country, everyone knows what Las Vegas is.
Right.
But if you become unfriendly to immigrants and then eventually it'll lead to tourists, it'll just push people away from the economy.
Yeah. So we need to, what I'm saying is we need to do all about make our border more protected. Nobody should really be, walking across our border anonymously. And then allowing the resources to be drawn away, and then smuggling to occur, going both ways. But we should have that level of tolerance to come up with a program where all of these residents are living here anonymously now, whether they were overstay on their visa or whether they walked across the border. We need to figure out a program where we can say, how can you become a citizen A, B, C affordably? Not by going to a lawyer and paying tens of thousands of dollars. How are you going to do it affordably and promptly so that we can unite and keep ourselves safe?
So focus internally first, then externally. It seems like immigration, at least over the last 10 years or so, has been build infrastructure, blockade ourselves in, and then remove the immigrants that are internally and pushing outwards.
The ones that basically broke the speed limit.
Yeah.
That's what it amounted to. If I was not living in the United States and the government essentially invited me to come, because that's basically what happened all through campaigning, all through narrative, all through actions at the border. They were inviting those people to come in. I would take advantage of that. I'd bring my family here. I would go through the toils of staying in the shadows in order to give myself that kind of opportunity.
Yeah, I like exactly what you're saying.
Especially if it amounted to a speed limit, speeding ticket, which is what it more or less amounts to.
So, do you think the immigration issue specifically in Nevada is it coming from the South? Is it people coming up from Mexico? Is it people coming down from Canada? Is it mostly people staying past their visa and just hanging out?
It's all the above in 39 different states mainly. There's a solid of 39 different states, 39 different countries that represent the lion's share of those millions of people that are living here, and it's all the above. It's people coming here, overstaying their visas, people coming across but we're getting the most attention of what's going on the southern border. But it's all the above.
And in one of the most diverse cities in the world that has that's one of the most tourist dense areas of Las Vegas. I'm not sure what the number is now, but I know before the pandemic it was about 42 or 43 million people visit here a year, at least from a documented perspective. How many of them then stay from tourism or who come up undocumented is quite an interesting.
Yeah, I never thought in those terms. If you were just visiting here and then you just hung out.
I guarantee you it's a bunch, right? Or people come down here, visit, they get in trouble for whatever reason, and they just decide to stay, or they get stuck in some of the dark things that happen on the strip between, sex trafficking and the drug war, which are a bunch of things which we could probably end up talking about for another few hours, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you've been busy over the last 6 months, especially recently. I've seen you a few times already. Yeah. Tell us a little bit of how we vote for you. Tell us what we need to do for the primaries to vote for Randell. Right. And then if when you do win the primary, what's the next step?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that I'm pushing right now and the thing that I've been kind of harping on for months now is the fact that any Nevada voter can change their label at any time. So right now you can still go online to register to vote register-to-vote.nv.gov, and you can change your party label. It's an easy process. You can show up at the election site, any county election site, and say, I want to vote for Randell Hynes. He's on the Democratic ticket, and they'll do the processing in order to change your label on your registration and hand you a Democratic ballot, and you can vote right away. So there's a little bit of a different process there if you're not already registered to vote and you show up, but there's a process that's very easy to update your label in order to vote. So we have 801,000 out of 2.2 million people that are not registered to vote as a Republican or Democrat. Those are the people that I'm appealing to say, okay, well, you've got an option. I'm here. I'm going to represent a larger share of the district. Please change your label. Go online to change your label, or just show up you're going to get a nonpartisan ballot. There's 3 different ballots. There's a Republican ballot, nonpartisan, and Democrat ballot. If you're nonpartisan or you're not a Republican or Democrat, you're going to get a nonpartisan ballot. Take it over to the election site and say that you want to switch it for a Democratic ballot. They'll do the processing that they need to do, and you can vote for Randell Hynes. And
let's say I'm a Republican, but I want to vote for you. How is it tough to then switch back immediately after?
Do it anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah. So basically, we're allowed, even though we're a closed primary state. Where the AB 321 last year allows us to do it at any time. So it's a liberal thing that will allow us to do a workaround right now until we actually get open primaries. This is just something we're pushing for open primaries and ranked choice voting, which is a voting system that goes very well with open primaries, which will allow us to do that later. But right now we only have this workaround, and the way it's set up right now, we won't have open primaries in RCV at earliest until 2026. But now we have this workaround, and that's what I'm asking folks to do.
And once you win the primary, what happens then between the primary, which I believe is starting now, which extends, I think, to June 14th. Right. And then what happens between June 14th and the elections?
So May 28th to June 10th is the early voting. It's the 2 weeks of early voting. There are several. There's generally about 6 to 10 sites open in my district, 3rd district, each day, and I'll actually have that all mapped out on my website. It's my name, Randell.Hynes.com. And then in order to vote on election day, you just show up on election day also, which is June 14th. After that point, you're free to change your label at any time, so you can just change back to whatever your preferred label is. And that's the kind of thing. It's kind of the cringe thing. You say, okay, well, I chose that label. Why do I have to change it in order to vote? Well, it's just the way it is in Nevada right now. If you don't like it, if you don't want to keep it that way, if it's too cringe, just change back to the label that you preferred. But that'll allow you to just go to the general election, and at least you won't be showing up and wondering, which is generally what we do. 10% of the people vote, and then they show up at the general election and wish they had better choices.
Yeah, don't we all? Randell, where do I send everyone to learn more about you? Social media, website, et cetera.
Right down the line. I'm very active on Twitter. That's Hynes for Nevada. I also have a personal Twitter that not so active in the last couple of weeks. Randell Hynes. It's my name, RandellHynes. And then on Facebook, I'm Hynes for Nevada, 03, and Instagram, Hynes for Nevada. And my email, surprise, RandellHynes.com. I've had Hynes.com since 1994. So back when you could actually download internet as a zip file. So
I have to say, Randell does have a great Twitter account. I started following him within the last few weeks, and very active person, very active, ton of engagement, ton of followers. And
if you say something, I'll respond.
Yeah.
And likely you'll get retweeted all right on my front page, because I'll show you exactly where I stand compared to what you have to say.
More moderation in Nevada. We love it. Randell, thank you for sharing your time with us. Really appreciate it. Best of luck here in the primaries, and then eventually onto the general election.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.